Most people would walk right past this penny without a second thought. It looks ordinary, feels ordinary. But the 1962 Lincoln penny carries a quiet story from a turning point in American history, and in the right condition or with the right detail, it can be far more interesting than its 1-cent face value suggests. This coin is the 1962 Lincoln 1-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small letter D below the date. It was produced during a time when pennies were still made of real copper, when the American economy was changing, and when everyday pocket change told a much bigger story about the nation itself. In 1962, the United States was deep into the Cold War era. John F. Kennedy was president, the space race was accelerating, and American manufacturing was running at full speed. Coins were not made to be collectibles. They were made to be used, spent, and forgotten. That's exactly why surviving examples in top condition matter today. The Lincoln cent design in 1962 was already more than 50 years old. Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the penny in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. By 1962, his portrait had become one of the most familiar images in American life. The design was created by Victor David Brenner, and it remained largely unchanged for decades, making it a symbol of stability during a rapidly changing century. The Denver Mint struck over 2 billion Lincoln pennies in 1962. That number alone tells you something important. This was not a rare coin when it was made. It was everywhere. It passed through grocery stores, gas stations, movie theaters, and school lunch lines. Because so many were produced, most were heavily used, scratched, and worn down over time. What makes the 1962 penny special today is not how rare it was back then, but how few examples survived in pristine condition. Coins that were saved, carefully stored, or simply forgotten in rolls can look dramatically different from the worn pennies most people remember. This coin is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. That high copper content gives it a rich, warm color that modern pennies simply don't have. In fact, the metal alone makes it heavier than today's cents. When you hold one, it feels solid, almost substantial. Compared to newer coins on the front, you'll see Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" across the top. The date, 1962, sits to the right of Lincoln's portrait, and just below it, the small D mint mark tells you it was struck in Denver. On the reverse, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, a design that was introduced in 1959 and used until 2008. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial. Most 1962 pennies look similar at first glance, but collectors pay attention to small details. The sharpness of Lincoln's hair, the clarity of the lettering, and the strength of the memorial lines all play a role in value. Even the color matters. Coins are graded as red, red-brown, or brown, depending on how much of their original copper color remains. Errors are another reason collectors examine this coin closely. While major errors are uncommon, some 1962 pennies were struck with minor issues that increase interest. These can include off-center strikes, weak strikes, or double details in the lettering. These are not mistakes you'll notice at a glance, but under magnification, they can make a big difference. There is also the fascination with die varieties. Slight differences in the dies used to strike the coins can create subtle variations that advanced collectors enjoy searching for. These are not dramatic changes, but they add personality to what might otherwise seem like a very ordinary penny. So why does value come into the conversation at all if billions were made? The answer lies in condition. A heavily circulated 1962 penny is typically worth only a few cents above face value. But a coin in mint condition, especially one that still has its full red copper luster, can be worth significantly more. Certified examples graded at the highest levels by professional grading services have sold for hundreds, and in some cases over $1,000. These are coins that look almost exactly as they did the day they left the Denver Mint, with no wear, no dulling, and no damage. Collectors are willing to pay these prices because such coins are surprisingly difficult to find. Copper reacts with air, moisture, and handling. Most pennies were stored loosely, touched constantly, or exposed to the elements. Finding one that escaped all of that is rare, even if the original mintage was massive. Auction records show that top-grade 1962 Lincoln pennies consistently attract attention. When one appears with exceptional color, sharp details, and professional certification, bidding can become competitive. These sales remind collectors that condition can matter more than age or rarity. Identifying a genuine 1962 D penny is straightforward, but it's still important to know what to look for. The date should be clear and evenly spaced. The D mint mark should appear natural, not added or altered. Added mint marks are one of the most common forms of coin tampering, and they usually look slightly off in position or shape. The weight is another clue. A real 1962 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. A significant difference could indicate damage, alteration, or a counterfeit. The color should also be consistent with copper. Any unusual magnetic behavior or odd texture is a red flag. One of the best ways to confirm authenticity and value is professional grading. While not every coin needs to be graded, high-quality examples often benefit from certification. It protects the coin and gives buyers confidence in what they're purchasing. There are also some fun and surprising facts tied to this penny. In 1962, the price of copper was already becoming a concern for the U.S. Mint. Just a few decades later, pennies would be changed to a mostly zinc composition. That makes the 1962 D penny part of the final generation of true copper cents. Another interesting detail is how many people unknowingly spent valuable coins. Before coin collecting became popular with the general public, high-grade pennies were often used without a second thought. That's why uncirculated examples are so scarce today. Collectors also appreciate this coin because it represents the everyday life of early 1960s America. It's not tied to a single dramatic event, but to millions of ordinary moments. That quiet historical connection is part of its appeal. Today, collectors love the 1962 D Lincoln penny for its simplicity, its copper beauty, and the challenge it presents. It's easy to find an example, but difficult to find a great one. That balance makes it a favorite among both beginner and advanced collectors. For new collectors, it's an accessible entry point into the world of Lincoln cents. For experienced collectors, it's a condition rarity that rewards patience and careful searching. And for everyday people, it's a reminder that even the smallest coin can hold a surprising story. So the next time you come across an old penny, take a closer look. Check the date. Look for the mint mark. Notice the color and the details. That quiet little 1962 D penny might not change your life, but it just might change the way you see the change in your pocket. Sometimes history doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers from a single cent, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. Most people walk past this coin every day without a second thought. It's small, brown, and looks ordinary. But what if I told you that a single 1964 Lincoln penny with no mint mark could quietly hold a story tied to one of the most intense economic moments in American history, and that some versions of this coin are still actively hunted by collectors today? The 1964 no mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint during a time of massive change. It features President Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. The words "In God We Trust" appear above Lincoln's head, Liberty sits to the left, and the date 1964 is on the right. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stands centered, with 1 cent and United States of America surrounding it. The phrase "E pluribus unum" rests above the memorial. The key detail many people notice is what's missing. There is no mint mark. That tells us this penny was made in Philadelphia, which at the time did not use a mint mark on cents. This small detail is important because it places the coin directly at the center of U.S. coin production during a very unusual year. To understand why the 1964 penny matters, you have to understand what was happening in America at the time. The early 1960s were marked by rising silver prices, public concern about coin shortages, and widespread hoarding. People were pulling coins out of circulation, afraid that rising metal values would soon make everyday change more valuable than its face value. In response, the U.S. Mint dramatically increased coin production. The goal was simple: flood the economy with enough coins so everyday commerce could continue smoothly. The year 1964 became one of the highest mintage years in U.S. coin history, not just for pennies, but for many denominations. The Lincoln cent was especially important because it was the backbone of everyday transactions. Billions of 1964 pennies were struck, and Philadelphia alone produced well over 2 billion Lincoln cents that year. This massive output is one reason the coin is still commonly found today. But common does not mean uninteresting. The 1964 penny was made from a bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This gives the coin its familiar reddish-brown color when new, and a deeper brown tone as it ages. It weighs about 3.11 grams and has a smooth edge. This copper composition is significant because just a few years later, rising copper prices would push the mint to change the metal content of the penny entirely. In design, the coin follows the classic Lincoln cent style introduced in 1959. That year marked the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and replaced the earlier wheat reverse with the Lincoln Memorial. By 1964, this design had become familiar to Americans, but today it serves as a visual snapshot of mid-20th century America. While most 1964 no-mint mark pennies are worth only a small premium over face value, collectors know that not all examples are equal. Condition matters enormously. A penny that spent decades bouncing around in pockets will look very different from one that was saved shortly after it left the mint. Uncirculated examples, especially those with bright red original copper color, are far more desirable. These are known as red cents, and they command higher prices because copper naturally darkens over time. Finding a 1964 penny that still retains its original mint luster is becoming more difficult with each passing year. Then there are the errors. Error coins are one of the main reasons collectors closely examine 1964 pennies. During a year of extremely high production, mistakes were bound to happen. Some pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design appears shifted to one side. Others show double dies, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a misalignment in the die used to strike the coin. There are also repunched dates, weak strikes, clipped planchets where part of the coin is missing, and die cracks that leave raised lines across the surface. These errors turn an otherwise common penny into something unique. Because each error is different, values vary widely. Minor errors may sell for a few dollars, while dramatic, eye-catching mistakes can bring much higher prices depending on condition and demand. Real auction results show how wide the range can be. A circulated 1964 no-mint mark penny with no special features usually sells for just a few cents to $1. But uncirculated red examples certified by major grading services have sold for $10, $20, or more. High-grade examples with near-perfect surfaces have reached significantly higher prices at auction. Error coins are where things get more interesting. Some authenticated 1964 double die cents have sold for hundreds of dollars. Major off-center strikes or dramatic mint errors can also reach into the hundreds, sometimes more, depending on rarity and visual appeal. So how do you know if a 1964 penny you find is real and worth examining further? First, check the date and mint mark area. If there is no letter below the date, that's normal for Philadelphia. Be cautious of altered coins where someone may have tried to remove a mint mark from a different coin. Under magnification, tampering often leaves scratches or unnatural surfaces. Next, weigh the coin. A genuine 1964 copper penny should weigh around 3.11 grams. A significant difference could indicate damage, an error, or a counterfeit. Also examine the color. Genuine copper pennies age naturally and often show even toning, while fakes or altered coins may have unusual or uneven coloring. Look closely at the lettering and date. If you suspect doubling, it should appear as a clear separation, not just a shadow or blur caused by wear. True double dies are part of the design itself and will be raised, not flat. If a coin appears unusual or valuable, collectors often recommend professional authentication. Reputable grading services can confirm authenticity, identify errors, and assign a grade that helps establish market value. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1964 penny that many people don't realize. Even though billions were made, the year 1964 marks the end of an era in more ways than one. It was the last year before major changes in U.S. coinage metals began to take hold. Within a few years, pennies would no longer be made from mostly copper. Another interesting detail is that many 1964 pennies sat in storage for years before being released. Because of the coin shortage, the mint continued striking coins dated 1964 well into 1965. This means some 1964 pennies actually entered circulation later than expected, adding to their unique place in history. Collectors today love the 1964 no-mint mark penny not because it's rare in the traditional sense, but because it represents a moment when America's money system was under pressure and change was inevitable. It's a coin tied to economics, history, and everyday life all at once. For beginners, it's an accessible entry point into coin collecting. For experienced collectors, it offers endless variety in condition and errors. And for people who simply enjoy history, it's a tangible reminder of a year when even a humble penny mattered. The next time you come across a 1964 Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Turn it over. Look closely. Check the details. That small piece of copper may not make you rich, but it carries a story that connects your pocket change to a turning point in American history. And sometimes, the most interesting treasures aren't the ones worth the most money, but the ones that quietly remind us how much history can fit into a single cent. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second glance. It looks ordinary, common, and forgettable. But the 1970 Lincoln penny has a story that connects America's economy, the last years of the wheat era's influence, and a moment when even a single cent quietly reflected major changes in U.S. history. And in the right condition or with the right mistake, this small copper coin can surprise you. This coin is the 1970 Lincoln 1-cent piece struck at the Denver Mint. The small letter D beneath the date tells us exactly where it was made. In 1970, billions of pennies were produced, and millions of them came from Denver. At first glance, this seems like one of the most ordinary coins you could own. But collectors know that ordinary is often where the most interesting stories begin. The year 1970 was a time of transition in the United States. The country was facing inflation, the Vietnam War was still ongoing, and everyday Americans were becoming more aware of the changing value of money. A penny no longer bought much, but it was still essential for daily life. Vending machines, parking meters, and small purchases all relied on coins like this one. The U.S. Mint continued producing Lincoln cents in massive numbers to keep up with demand. The Lincoln penny itself had already been around for more than 60 years by 1970. First issued in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it became the longest-running design in U.S. coinage history. By 1970, the familiar face of Lincoln on the front was something every American recognized. It symbolized stability, tradition, and trust in the nation's money. The 1970 penny features Abraham Lincoln's profile on the front, facing right. The words "In God We Trust" appear along the top, with liberty to the left, and the date 1970 to the right. Beneath the date is the small D mint mark, indicating Denver. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, making this one of the most detailed designs ever used on a U.S. coin. In terms of metal, the 1970 Lincoln penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This is important because just a few years later, rising copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to change the penny's composition. That means this coin comes from the final era of traditional copper cents. It has a solid feel, a warm color when well preserved, and a weight that modern pennies simply do not have. So why do collectors care about a penny that was made in such large numbers? The answer lies in condition, detail, and mistakes. While most 1970 pennies are worth only face value, examples that survived in pristine condition are far less common. Coins that were never heavily circulated, never scratched, and never dulled by decades of handling can be surprisingly valuable. In uncirculated condition, where the original mint luster is still bright and the details are sharp, the value begins to climb. Coins graded in higher mint state levels can sell for several dollars, and in exceptional cases, even more. Collectors are willing to pay a premium for coins that look almost exactly the way they did when they left the Denver Mint over 50 years ago. Errors also play a major role in the appeal of the 1970 penny. During the minting process, mistakes sometimes occurred. These errors were not intentional, but they create unique coins that stand out from the rest. Common errors include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned, clipped planchets where part of the coin is missing, and double details caused by misaligned dies. While the most famous double die penny of 1970 comes from the San Francisco Mint, Denver minted coins can still show minor doubling or striking anomalies that collectors seek out. Even small differences can turn an everyday penny into a collectible item. At auctions and coin shows, high-grade 1970 pennies have sold for prices that surprise non-collectors. While they do not reach the dramatic levels of rare keydate coins, Certified examples in top condition have sold for tens or even hundreds of dollars. The value comes from rarity in preservation, not rarity in production. To identify a genuine 1970D Lincoln penny, start with the basics. Check the date and look for the D mint mark beneath it. The coin should feel solid and slightly heavier than modern pennies. Examine the details on Lincoln's hair, beard, and coat. Sharp lines and clean surfaces indicate less wear. On the reverse, look closely at the Lincoln Memorial. Clear columns and visible steps are signs of a well-struck coin. Fakes are uncommon for this coin, but altered coins do exist. Some people add mint marks to pennies that originally had none. A real D mint mark should look natural, not raised awkwardly or placed incorrectly. If the mint mark looks suspicious, uneven, or out of place, it may have been tampered with. When in doubt, professional coin grading services can confirm authenticity. One fun fact about the 1970 penny is how it represents the end of an era without anyone realizing it at the time. Americans spent these coins freely, dropped them in jars, and lost them in couch cushions, unaware that copper pennies would soon disappear. Today, many people save pre-1982 pennies because of their copper content alone. Another interesting detail is how the Lincoln Memorial design would later be replaced in 2009 with commemorative reverses, and then with the Union Shield. That makes the 1970D penny part of a design era that many collectors feel nostalgic about. It reminds them of childhood, simpler transactions, and the sound of copper coins in a pocket. Collectors love this coin not because it is flashy or extremely rare, but because it rewards careful attention, teaches patience. It encourages people to look closely, to learn the difference between worn and preserved, ordinary and special. For many collectors, the 1970D penny is an entry point into the world of grading, condition, and error hunting. It is also a reminder that valuable coins are not always ancient or dramatic. Sometimes they are hiding in plain sight, mixed in with everyday change. The joy comes from discovery, from realizing that history can sit quietly in your hand. So the next time you see a 1970D Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look at it carefully. Think about where it has been, what it has seen, and how it connects to a changing America. Because even the smallest coin can carry a story worth telling. And sometimes, the most ordinary pennies are the ones that make collectors look twice. Most people have held this coin in their hand and never thought twice about it. But what if I told you that a simple brown penny from 1975, with a small letter D under the date, can still spark curiosity, collector interest, and even surprising value today? This is the story of the 1975 D Lincoln penny, a coin that quietly traveled through American pockets during a time of big change. The coin we're talking about is the 1975 Lincoln 1-cent coin with a D mint mark, meaning it was struck at the Denver Mint. At first glance, it looks just like many other pennies. Abraham Lincoln's familiar face is on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial appears on the back. It's modest, simple, and easy to overlook. Yet behind this everyday appearance is a snapshot of American history and a coin that still matters to collectors. To understand this penny, we need to go back to the mid-1970s. The year 1975 was a challenging and memorable time in the United States. The country was recovering from the Vietnam War, dealing with inflation, rising prices, and changes in everyday life. Coins were being used heavily, especially pennies, which were still an important part of daily transactions. The U.S. Mint was producing billions of cents each year to keep up with demand. The Denver Mint played a major role in that effort. In 1975, it struck well over 4 billion Lincoln pennies. That huge number tells us one important thing right away. The 1975 D penny is not rare by mintage alone. It was made to circulate, to be spent, dropped into jars, lost in couch cushions, and passed from hand to hand across the country. The design of the 1975 D penny comes from a long-running series. Abraham Lincoln has appeared on the front of the penny since 1909, making it one of the longest-used portraits in U.S. coinage. On the front, you see Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1975 to the right. Just below the date is the small D mint mark, identifying Denver as the place of manufacture. The back of the coin features the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. Above it are the words United States of America, and below are 1 cent, with E pluribus unum, across the top. In terms of metal, the 1975 D penny is made mostly of copper. At that time, pennies were composed of about 95% copper, with small amounts of zinc and tin. This gives the coin its familiar reddish-brown color, especially when it's new. Just a few years later, in 1982, the mint would change the penny's composition to mostly zinc, making older copper cents like this one more appealing to some collectors and hoarders. So if billions were made, why do people still care about this penny? The answer lies in condition, errors, and history. While most 1975 D pennies are worth only 1 cent, some examples stand out. Coins that were never circulated, kept in excellent condition, or struck with unusual mistakes can be worth significantly more. Condition is one of the biggest factors. A penny that spent decades bouncing around in pockets will show scratches, dull color, and worn details. But a 1975 D penny that was saved right after it was made, especially one with bright red copper color and sharp details, can be desirable to collectors. These are known as uncirculated coins, and they are far less common than worn ones. Mint errors also add excitement to this coin. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the striking process. Some 1975 D pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design is shifted to one side. Others may show doubled lettering, where parts of the date or words appear slightly doubled. There are also cases of die cracks, where thin raised lines appear on the surface due to damage to the minting tools. While these errors are not extremely rare, they are rare enough to catch a collector's eye. A dramatic off-center strike or a clearly visible doubled die can sell for far more than face value, sometimes ranging from tens to hundreds of dollars depending on how strong and clear the error is. Auction records help show the real-world value of this coin. Most circulated 1975 D pennies sell for just a few cents when bought in bulk. But uncirculated examples with strong red color have sold for several dollars. High-grade coins that have been professionally graded by major coin services can sell for even more, sometimes reaching into the $20 to $50 range. Error coins, especially attractive ones, can go much higher depending on demand. It's important to be realistic. Stories about ordinary 1975 D pennies being worth thousands of dollars are not accurate. However, that doesn't mean this coin is boring or worthless. It means the value is hidden in the details, not the date alone. Knowing how to identify a genuine 1975 D penny is simple. Start by checking the date and the mint mark. The D should be small and clean, located just below the date. The weight should feel normal for a copper penny, about 3.1 grams. The color should look like copper, not silver or unusually light. The edges should be smooth, not reeded. Fakes of this coin are uncommon because it is not extremely valuable, but altered coins do exist. Some people try to modify dates or add fake errors. That's why examining the coin carefully is important. If something looks too strange or too good to be true, it probably is. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1975 D penny. During the 1970s, many Americans began saving coins because of rising metal prices. Some people believed copper cents might one day be worth more melted down than as money. That led to millions of pennies being stored away in jars, drawers, and coffee cans, including countless 1975 D examples. Another interesting detail is that 1975 pennies were never officially released in special proof sets from the Denver Mint. Proof coins were made only in San Francisco that year. This makes high-quality Denver examples a bit more interesting to collectors who focus on mint-by-mint sets. Collectors today enjoy the 1975 D penny because it represents the end of an era. It comes from the final years when pennies were mostly copper. It also belongs to the long-running Lincoln Memorial series, which ended in 2008. For many people, this coin brings back memories of childhood, loose change, and simpler transactions. For beginners, the 1975 D penny is an easy entry point into coin collecting. It's affordable, widely available, and full of learning opportunities. You can practice grading, look for errors, and understand how condition affects value, all with a coin that won't break the bank. And that's what makes this penny special. Not because it's rare in numbers, but because it tells a story. It tells the story of America in the 1970s, of everyday money, of billions of small copper coins quietly doing their job. It reminds us that even the most common objects can hold history, curiosity, and meaning if we take the time to look closer. So the next time you find a 1975 D Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it. Turn it over. Check the details. Think about where it's been and what it represents. Because sometimes the most interesting stories are hiding in plain sight, right there in the smallest coin in your pocket. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a penny that looks completely ordinary, but might quietly tell a story about one of the most important turning points in modern American coin history. A penny most people have spent without a second thought. The 1981 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, this coin doesn't look rare. It doesn't look special. And yet, collectors across the country still search for it, study it, and sometimes pay surprising amounts for the right example. Today, we're going to uncover why this simple 1-cent coin still matters. This is the 1981 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. No mint mark means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not use a mint mark on pennies during that time. Millions were made, and many are still sitting in jars, drawers, and old coffee cans across America. But not all 1981 pennies are the same, and that's where the story begins. To understand this coin, we need to step back to the early 1980s. The United States was dealing with rising metal prices, inflation, and major changes in how coins were produced. Copper, which had been used in pennies for generations, was becoming expensive. The government was already planning a major shift in penny composition, a change that would officially happen in 1982. The 1981 penny sits right on the edge of that transition. It represents the final full year when Lincoln pennies were made entirely from a traditional copper-based alloy. That alone gives it historical importance. It's one of the last true copper Lincoln cents before the modern era changed the coin forever. The design of the 1981 penny is classic and familiar. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln's portrait, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. The words "In God We Trust" appear above his head, with liberty to the left and the date 1981 to the right. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design used from 1959 until 2008. Look closely, and you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. This level of detail made the Lincoln Memorial reverse one of the most admired designs in American coinage. Now let's talk about what makes the 1981 no mint mark penny unique. First, the metal. This coin is made of about 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. That gives it a solid feel and a rich reddish-brown color when well preserved. Later pennies, made mostly of zinc, simply don't feel the same. Second, the quality. By 1981, the Philadelphia Mint was producing enormous quantities of pennies to meet everyday demand. Speed mattered, and that sometimes led to mistakes. While most 1981 pennies are common, certain error coins from this year are what collectors truly hunt for. One known category includes off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned on the coin. Another includes double die errors, where parts of the lettering or date appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment during the die-making process. These errors are subtle, but to collectors they can make a dramatic difference in value. There are also cases of weak strikes, clipped planchets, and unusually sharp examples with near-perfect details. While these are not everyday finds, they do exist, and they are the reason people still inspect 1981 pennies carefully. So why would a penny that was made in the millions be considered valuable at all? The answer lies in condition and rarity within that condition. Most 1981 pennies were heavily circulated. They were used, scratched, darkened, and worn down over decades. Finding one today in pristine, uncirculated condition is much harder than people expect. Coins that look brand new, with full original mint luster and no signs of wear, are highly desirable. Professional grading services evaluate these coins on a scale, and the highest grades are extremely rare. That rarity is what creates value. When it comes to real collector prices, the difference can be shocking. A worn 1981 no mint mark penny is usually worth just 1 cent. But a sharply struck, uncirculated example can sell for several dollars. If it's graded at the very top of the scale, prices can rise into the tens or even hundreds of dollars. Error coins are where things get even more interesting. Verified double die or major off-center 1981 pennies have sold at auction for hundreds of dollars, depending on the strength of the error and the condition of the coin. These are real sales, not rumors, and they show how much collectors value unusual examples. Of course, this also raises an important question. How do you tell a real, valuable 1981 no-mint mark penny from a fake or altered coin? The first step is weight. A genuine 1981 copper penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter, something may be wrong. Next, look closely at the date and lettering. Doubling should look natural and raised, not scratched or etched. Be cautious of coins that appear altered. Some people attempt to add or remove mint marks, or artificially create errors. A genuine no-mint mark penny from 1981 should have a smooth surface where a mint mark would normally be. Any roughness or tooling marks are red flags. Magnification helps, but experience matters even more. That's why serious collectors often rely on professional grading services to authenticate and grade their coins. These services confirm whether a coin is genuine and protect buyers and sellers alike. Now for some fun facts. Even though the penny's face value is just 1 cent, the copper inside a 1981 penny has often been worth more than 1 cent based on metal prices. That irony is one of the reasons the US government changed the penny's composition shortly after. Another surprising detail is how many people unknowingly spent collectible pennies. During the 1980s and 1990s, most Americans had no reason to save pennies. Millions of potential high-grade coins were lost to circulation simply because no one thought they mattered. Collectors today love the 1981 no-mint mark penny because it represents the end of an era. It's a reminder of when American coins were heavier, richer in metal, and made with a different philosophy. It also appeals to collectors who enjoy searching for hidden value in ordinary places. There's something exciting about knowing that a coin you already own could be worth more than you think. It turns everyday change into a treasure hunt. That sense of possibility is what keeps coin collecting alive. As you look at your spare change, remember this: not every valuable coin looks rare. Some of the most interesting pieces of history are hiding in plain sight, quietly waiting for someone to notice. The 1981 Lincoln penny with no mint mark may seem ordinary, but it carries the weight of history, change, and possibility. And the next time you hear the soft clink of a penny hitting the table, you might wonder what story it has to tell. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet could be worth far more than 1 cent. A coin so common that millions of Americans have handled it, spent it, or ignored it without realizing what they had. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1984 no-mint mark Lincoln penny and why collectors still search for this coin more than 40 years later. The 1984 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint in Philadelphia. When a penny from this era has no mint mark under the date, it means it was struck in Philadelphia, the original and oldest U.S. mint facility. In 1984, pennies were still everyday pocket change, used by nearly every American, and no one at the time thought they would ever be discussed as collectible coins. But history has a way of surprising us. To understand this penny, we need to go back to the early 1980s. The United States was coming out of a difficult economic period. Inflation had been high, metal prices were volatile, and the mint was looking for ways to keep production costs low. Just 2 years earlier, in 1982, the composition of the Lincoln penny had changed. Instead of being mostly copper, pennies were now made with a zinc core and a thin copper coating. By 1984, this new composition was fully in place and billions of pennies were being produced every year to meet demand. The Lincoln penny itself has a long and respected history. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical person. By 1984, Americans had grown up with Lincoln's portrait on the penny. It felt familiar, almost timeless. The design on the front, created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, shows Lincoln facing right with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right. On the reverse side of the 1984 penny, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial. This design was introduced in 1959 and remained in use until 2008. If you look closely at the memorial, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside. It's one of the smallest detailed figures ever placed on a circulating U.S. coin, and many people don't even notice it without magnification. Most 1984 no-mint mark pennies are worth just 1 cent today. They were produced in huge numbers. Well over 7 billion coins were struck at the Philadelphia Mint that year. With numbers like that, rarity might seem impossible. But in coin collecting, value doesn't always come from how many coins were made. Sometimes it comes from what went wrong. This is where the story of the 1984 penny becomes truly interesting. Among collectors, the 1984 Lincoln penny is famous for one specific error, often called the doubled ear variety. This error affects Lincoln's ear on the front of the coin, making it appear as though the ear is doubled or thicker than normal. Unlike damage that happens after a coin leaves the mint, this doubling was created during the die-making process, meaning it is a true mint error. The doubled ear error is subtle. To the untrained eye, the coin may look completely normal. But under magnification, the extra outline and depth around Lincoln's ear become clear. This error didn't happen on every 1984 penny, only on a small number struck from a specific die. That's why collectors consider it special. What makes this error even more fascinating is that it went unnoticed for years. These pennies circulated freely, mixed with regular coins, passed from hand to hand. Some were spent on coffee, others dropped into tip jars, and many were tossed into jars and drawers. Only later did collectors begin to identify and study the error, realizing that something unusual had slipped into everyday change. Because of this, genuine 1984 doubled ear pennies can still be found today. Unlike older rare coins that are mostly locked away in collections, this one still has a sense of mystery and possibility. Every time someone checks a jar of old pennies, there's a small chance they could find one dot. When it comes to value, condition matters a great deal. A regular 1984 no-mint mark penny in worn condition is worth face value. Even uncirculated examples usually sell for just a few cents. But the doubled ear variety is different. Depending on condition, a genuine 1984 doubled ear penny can sell for anywhere from several $100s to several $1,000s. Coins in lower uncirculated condition have sold for a few $100s, while high-quality examples with strong detail and minimal marks have reached well over $2,000 at auction. These prices are real, documented results from collectors who recognized what they had. Of course, not every coin that looks doubled is valuable. Many pennies show damage from circulation, scratches, or flattening that can create the illusion of doubling. That's why identification is so important. To identify a real 1984 doubled ear penny, the first thing you need is magnification. A basic coin loop or even a strong magnifying glass can help. Focus specifically on Lincoln's ear. On a normal penny, the ear has clean, simple lines. On the doubled ear variety, you'll see extra thickness and a clear secondary outline, especially along the lower and back edges of the ear. It's also important to understand that the doubling should look smooth and raised, not jagged or flattened. True mint errors are part of the coin's design, not damage added later. If the coin looks scraped, dented, or uneven, it's likely not the valuable variety. Because of the high values involved, many collectors choose to have potential doubled ear pennies authenticated by a professional coin grading service. These services examine the coin, confirm whether the error is genuine, and assign it a grade that helps determine market value. While grading does cost money, it can be worth it for a coin that may be valuable. There are also fakes and altered coins on the market. Some people attempt to carve or modify Lincoln's ear to imitate the doubled look. These altered coins usually lack the smooth, natural appearance of a real mint error. Again, careful inspection and professional verification are key. Beyond errors, the 1984 penny has some fun and surprising details. Because it was made with a zinc core, the coin is lighter than older copper pennies. If the copper coating is damaged, the gray zinc underneath can become visible, giving the coin an unusual appearance. This change in composition marked a major shift in U.S. coinage history and is one reason modern pennies age differently than older ones. Another interesting fact is that 1984 pennies were among the first generations of zinc cents that Americans used extensively. At the time, few people realized the long-term effects of the new metal. Today, collectors often find these pennies with bubbling or corrosion, which happens when zinc reacts with moisture after the copper plating is breached. Collectors love the 1984 no-mint mark penny not because it's old or beautiful, but because of what it represents. It's a reminder that valuable coins don't always come from the distant past. Sometimes, they're hiding in plain sight, in years we remember clearly, in change we once spent without a second thought. This penny also appeals to beginners and experienced collectors alike. Beginners enjoy the thrill of searching for the doubled ear error, knowing they can still find one without spending a fortune up front. Experienced collectors appreciate the historical context, the minting process, and the story behind how the error was discovered. There's also a strong emotional connection. Many collectors remember using these pennies as children or seeing them in everyday life. Finding one today can feel like reconnecting with a piece of personal history, while also holding something that has real value. As time goes on, fewer high-quality examples remain. Coins get lost, damaged, or destroyed. That makes well-preserved doubled ear pennies even more desirable. While no one can predict the future of the coin market, interest in well-known mint errors has remained strong for decades. So the next time you come across a handful of old pennies, don't rush past the 1984 date. Take a closer look. That ordinary-looking coin might have a hidden detail that tells a much bigger story. In the world of coin collecting, knowledge is often more valuable than the coin itself. The 1984 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny teaches us that even modern change can hold secrets, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to notice. And who knows? Somewhere out there, in a jar, a drawer, or a forgotten pocket, another one of these pennies may still be waiting to be discovered. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet could tell a story most people never hear. A 1990 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. Millions were made, billions were spent, and almost all were forgotten. But a small number still holds secrets that collectors quietly search for every day. This video is about the 1990 no mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin many people overlook, but one that sits at the crossroads of modern American history, mass production, and surprising collector interest. If you've ever wondered whether the pennies in your change jar matter, this story might change the way you look at them forever. The 1990 no mint Mark Lincoln penny was made in the United States at the Philadelphia Mint. When a Lincoln cent has no mint mark, it means it was struck in Philadelphia. That's not a mistake. That's how U.S. coins were designed for many decades. Philadelphia, the original mint, did not place a mint mark on pennies until much later. In 1990. The Lincoln cent was already an American icon. The design had been in use since 1909, created to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By the time 1990 arrived, this penny had passed through the hands of multiple generations, carried through wars, economic booms, recessions, and cultural change. The year 1990 itself was a turning point. The Cold War was ending. Technology was moving fast. The United States was entering a new decade, and the penny was still there, quietly doing its job 1 cent at a time. That makes the 1990 penny a snapshot of America at the very edge of the modern era. This coin was made primarily for everyday use. It wasn't created to be rare or special. It was meant to circulate, to buy gum, newspapers, and small items that were still affordable for a penny back then. But that ordinary purpose is exactly what makes surviving examples interesting today. The 1990 no mint Mark Lincoln penny is made mostly of zinc, with a thin copper coating on the outside. This composition began in 1982, when rising copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to change the metal content of the penny. Many people still believe all pennies are solid copper, but by 1990, that was no longer true. On the front of the coin, you'll see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1990 to the right. There is no letter under the date, which confirms it was made in Philadelphia. On the back of the coin is the Lincoln Memorial, which was used on pennies from 1959 to 2008. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial. This detail is one of the reasons collectors love this design. At first glance, there is nothing flashy about the 1990 penny. But collectors know that value often hides in details, not in first impressions. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made by the billions? The answer lies in condition, errors, and survival. Most 1990 no mint mark pennies were heavily circulated. They were scratched, worn, and eventually lost or discarded. Finding one today in pristine condition, especially one that looks almost new, is surprisingly difficult. Coins are graded based on how well they've been preserved. A heavily used penny might be worth only 1 cent. But a 1990 penny in near-perfect condition with sharp details and original shine can be worth significantly more to collectors. Then there are mint errors. Some 1990 Lincoln pennies were struck with mistakes that slipped past quality control. These errors are what collectors actively hunt for. One example is a double die error, where parts of the design appear doubled, especially in the lettering or date. Another is an off-center strike, where the design is not properly aligned on the coin. There are also clipped planchets, where part of the coin is missing due to a metal cutting error. These errors are not common, and when they appear on a widely collected coin like the Lincoln cent, they can dramatically increase value. While most 1990 no-mint mark pennies sell for just a few cents, error examples and high-grade specimens have sold for much more. In online auctions and collector marketplaces, uncirculated 1990 pennies graded by professional services have sold for anywhere from $10 to over $50, depending on condition. Error coins can sell for hundreds of dollars if the mistake is clear, dramatic, and verified. That may not sound life-changing, but remember, this is a coin many people ignore completely. It's a reminder that value doesn't always announce itself loudly. Of course, with any collectible, it's important to know how to identify a real coin and avoid misinformation. A genuine 1990 no-mint mark penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. It should have a copper-colored surface, not solid copper all the way through. If you see a bright silver color or unusual weight, that's a sign something may be off. Be cautious of exaggerated claims online. You may see listings claiming a 1990 penny is worth thousands of dollars simply because it has no mint mark. That is not true. The no mint mark alone does not make it rare. Value depends on condition and verified errors. Professional grading services exist for a reason. If you believe you have an unusual or high-quality example, getting it examined by experts is the safest way to know its real value. There are also fun details about the 1990 penny that many people don't know. For example, because it's mostly zinc, these pennies can corrode if the copper coating is damaged. That's why you'll sometimes see older pennies bubbling or peeling. This flaw is part of why well-preserved examples are harder to find. Another interesting fact is that millions of people alive today have never used a penny to buy something meaningful. Inflation has slowly pushed the penny toward irrelevance, yet collectors keep its history alive. The Lincoln Memorial design used in 1990 is no longer produced. Modern pennies feature different reverse designs, making the 1990 coin part of a closed chapter in U.S. coinage. Collectors today love the 1990 no-mint mark penny not because it's rare by default, but because it represents the challenge of finding quality in a sea of quantity. It's about hunting through everyday change and discovering something unexpectedly well-preserved or uniquely flawed. It also appeals to beginners. You don't need thousands of dollars to start collecting coins like this. Anyone can look through their pocket change and learn what details matter. In a world obsessed with instant value, coins like the 1990 Lincoln penny teach patience. They reward curiosity, careful observation, and respect for history. So the next time you see a penny dated 1990 with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it up to the light. Look at Lincoln's face. Check the lettering. Examine the edges. Because sometimes the most common objects carry the quietest stories. And occasionally, they carry a little extra value for those who know what to look for. If you enjoyed learning about this overlooked piece of American history, keep your eyes open. There are many more ordinary coins hiding extraordinary stories, just waiting to be found. Have you ever looked at a penny from your pocket and wondered if it might be hiding a story, or even a secret value, that most people walk right past? Today, we're talking about a coin that millions of Americans have handled without a second thought, yet collectors still search carefully for special examples of it. This is the story of the 1996 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. The 1996 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint in Denver. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary penny. It has Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the front and the familiar Lincoln Memorial on the back. But as with many U.S. coins, what seems ordinary on the surface can become interesting when you understand the history, the details, and the small differences that collectors care about. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the year 1996. The United States was in the middle of a decade of economic growth. The internet was starting to enter everyday life, and the U.S. Mint was focused on producing massive numbers of coins for daily commerce. Pennies were still widely used, and the Lincoln cent remained one of the most produced coins in American history. In 1996, the Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of pennies to meet the country's demand for change. The Lincoln penny itself has a much longer story. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. This made it the first regular U.S. coin to feature a real historical person. By 1996, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for nearly 90 years, making it a familiar symbol of American money. The design used in 1996 was created by Victor David Brenner on the front, showing Lincoln's profile, while the back featured the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo. One of the key features of the 1996 D penny is the small letter D just below the year on the front of the coin. This mint mark tells us the coin was made in Denver. Mint marks are important to collectors because they reveal where a coin was produced and can sometimes affect rarity and value. In 1996, pennies were struck at both the Philadelphia Mint, which uses no mint mark, and the Denver Mint, which uses the D. The metal composition of the 1996 D Lincoln penny is also worth noting. Unlike older pennies made mostly of copper, this coin is composed of 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating. This change happened in 1982 as a cost-saving measure. As a result, the 1996 penny feels light in the hand and weighs about 2.5 grams. While it looks copper, most of its core is zinc. Design details matter to collectors even on common coins. On the front, Lincoln faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the year 1996 to the right, followed by the D mint mark. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial is shown in fine detail, and if you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. Above it are the words "United States of America," and below it, 1 cent, with E pluribus unum, across the top of the memorial. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made in such large numbers? The answer lies in condition, errors, and collector interest. While most 1996 D pennies are only worth 1 cent, some examples stand out. Coins that were never circulated, meaning they were never used in everyday transactions, can be worth more to collectors, especially if they still have their original shine and no visible wear. Even more interesting are error coins. During the minting process, mistakes sometimes happen. These errors can turn a common penny into a collectible. For the 1996 D penny, collectors look for errors such as off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned, or double dies, where parts of the lettering or Lincoln's profile appear doubled. These errors are not common, and when they are confirmed, they can sell for much more than face value. There are also examples of clipped planchets, where a piece of the coin's edge is missing due to a manufacturing issue, and broad strikes, where the coin was struck without a proper collar, causing it to spread out and look wider than normal. These types of errors attract collectors because they show the human and mechanical side of coin production. In terms of real-world value, most circulated 1996 D pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. However, uncirculated examples in high grades can sell for a few dollars. Certified coins graded by professional services can bring higher prices if they are in near-perfect condition. Error coins can sell anywhere from $20 to several $100s, depending on the type and severity of the error and the demand from collectors at the time of sale. Auction records show that while this is not a rare date penny, exceptional examples still find buyers. For example, a high-grade uncirculated 1996 D penny with strong luster and no visible marks can sell for $10 to $30. Error examples, especially dramatic off-center strikes or strong double dies, can command much higher prices when verified by a trusted grading service. Because value depends so heavily on authenticity, it's important to know how to identify a real 1996 D Lincoln penny. Start by checking the weight. A genuine coin should weigh around 2.5 grams. Look closely at the mint mark. On real coins, the D should look clean and well-formed, not scratched in or glued on. Fake mint marks do exist, although they are more common on higher value dates. Examine the details under good lighting. Real coins have sharp, consistent design elements. If the lettering looks uneven, blurry, or strangely shaped, it could be damage rather than a true mint error. Also, be cautious of coins that look altered, such as ones that have been sanded, polished, or artificially toned. These changes usually reduce value rather than increase it. One surprising fact about the 1996 D penny is how many still exist in excellent condition. Because it's a relatively modern coin, many examples were saved in rolls or jars and never circulated heavily. This makes it a favorite for beginner collectors who want to learn about grading, mint marks, and errors without spending a lot of money. Another fun detail is that 1996 pennies were among the coins used during a time when penny usage was already being debated. Even back then, people questioned whether the 1-cent coin would continue to be practical. Yet here we are today, still talking about it, still collecting it, and still finding interest in its details. Collectors love the 1996 D Lincoln penny not because it's rare, but because it represents the everyday history of American money. It's a coin that millions of people used without thinking, yet it still carries the image of one of the nation's most respected presidents. For collectors, it's a reminder that value isn't always about age or rarity. Sometimes it's about condition, story, and the thrill of finding something special in a familiar place. This penny also appeals to people who enjoy searching through pocket change or old jars of coins. It's accessible. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to own one. All you need is curiosity and a careful eye. And sometimes that's what collecting is really about. So the next time you come across a 1996 D Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment to look at it. Check the details. Think about where it's been and how many hands it's passed through. While most are just worth a cent, a few carry stories, errors, and qualities that make them worth much more to the right person. And that's what makes coins like this so fascinating. Even the most ordinary penny can become extraordinary when you know what to look for. Who knows? The next coin you examine might not just be spare change. It might be a small piece of American history waiting to be noticed.